Rasa.
Hare Krishna.
But you won't be disappointed because now we have one of the great genius intellectual devotees of the Hare Krishna movement, one of the early sannyasi. He's been a sannyasi for 40-something years now.
46.
46 years.
I took sannyas when I was 3 years old.
Everyone knows Sridayananda Maharaj, so please welcome him.
Hey, thank you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, thank you all for coming. I met a very nice guest here, Angie, who's a professional singer, and like that. And Angie said that she would sing Hare Krishna just for a minute, and then we'll get to the questions and answers. She's from Arizona, came here with her family, and she's moving to this area, so I invited her to come and sing for everybody. Just a minute or two, okay?
What was that?
Just a minute or two.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you, number one. I was stranded on these streets here in Venice last year. People walked right by me and never heard me singing. And this is an honor and a blessing, so thank you for that. But I just recently started chanting, and my whole world's changed in 6 months from sound therapy. So I'm telling you, like, my life is different now. I'm a mother of 4, and life has been really hard, but things are now so beautiful. And it's all contrast. It's just hard. Alright, I don't even know if I'm doing this right. I'm studying this stuff on my own, so we're just going to go for it, okay? Thanks for being here with me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for your time.
Yeah.
Please take 1 pack of books.
Oh, thank you so much. That was such a blessing. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, who can, yeah, you can film? Oh, but I can film Arabian. Okay, questions and answers. And we're going to do it in English. So, any questions? First, someone's got to tell me what prizes I can win if I get the answers right. Someone's got to point all the prizes, right?
You can get the free feast.
The free feast. Okay, any questions?
You got a question.
Where? Yes, please. Please stand up and scream so everybody can hear.
Okay, so I'm studying thanatology, and it makes me wonder if death is the ideal state of the soul.
Yeah, death is the ideal state of the soul. No. Sorry, you didn't win our grand prize. No, the ideal state of the soul is life, real life, pure life, full of ecstasy and knowledge.
But it's filled with suffering.
No, it's not. When you do it wrong, it hurts. When you do it right, it feels great.
Yes.
So that's Krishna consciousness. You learn how to do life right, and then you're always happy. You know that old saying, when everything else fails, read the directions. And so fortunately, we have this great literature. We have so much wisdom, and if we follow it, I was just telling a devotee, an old friend, that when I was 20 years old, just a very short time ago, when I was 20 years old, and I just joined, brace yourself, the Hare Krishna movement. And I remember I was in Berkeley, California, and I used to always tell the guests that would come with great enthusiasm that in Krishna consciousness, if you practice it sincerely, you become happier and happier forever. And every time I would tell somebody that, I was just overwhelmed by the glory of it, just the greatness, that there's nothing else could equal that. That for all eternity you become happier and happier. And that's my experience personally. There's always a few bumps in the road, and we have so many learning experiences, and sometimes we suffer. It's like, for example, I grew up, I was very, very fortunate. I had really loving parents to whom I'll be eternally grateful. And of course, I could tell you all the stories when I suffered as a kid, but in retrospect, I was extremely fortunate and blessed and had a very happy childhood. And actually, sometimes suffering a bit, it's just, they're learning experiences, but ultimately, if we follow Krishna consciousness, we'll always be happy more and more. So it's a great deal. Any other question? Yes, that young lady in the dark green.
You talk about association on our path for spiritual.
Association on our path to Krishna consciousness. Dime con quien andas. Yeah, they say in every language a man is known by the company he keeps. And I apologize for that male chauvinist rendition of the proverb, but a man is known by the company he keeps. So it's the nature of life. It's the nature of life that we are influenced by what's around us. And so the art of life, in a sense, is creating a spiritual environment around you in terms of the company you keep, the people you associate with. And of course, the first level of environment is your own body, because ultimately as souls, we live within our body. And so our first environment is our own body. And at every moment, we are recreating our body. There's a famous pre-Socratic Greek philosopher named Heraclitus, personal friend of mine. And about 2,500 years ago, he said that he's famous for having said, you cannot step in the same river twice. Interestingly, at the time of Buddhism, about 2,500 years ago, which emphasized the ever-changing nature of the world, that was a very popular teaching even in Europe. People like Heraclitus. So you can't step in the same river twice. And I say, sort of to use that type of analogy, you can't breathe twice in the same body. Because at every moment our body is changing. And so spiritual practice means, a big part of it is creating a spiritual body by the food we put in it, by our association, the music we listen to. You don't want to listen all day to, old Beatles songs. We have to also listen to spiritual music. And so by listening to spiritual music, by eating spiritual food, associating with spiritual people, our body becomes spiritualized, our environment becomes spiritual, and it becomes very easy. You're swimming with the current instead of against the current. So I'd say that's the art of life, is creating a spiritual atmosphere around you in terms of your community, your society, your own body, your own mental life. Hopefully we all have a mental life. And so, Hare Krishna. Any other question? Yes.
Do you have anything to say about chanting japa?
Do I have anything to say about chanting japa? Well, yeah. Japa is undoubtedly, wildly the most popular spiritual activity in ISKCON. Even if people can't do kirtan or eat prasadam, everyone chants japa.
What is japa?
I'm joking. Okay, you're right. What is japa? Sorry. Japa is chanting Hare Krishna, but not boisterously singing and dancing and playing, hopefully, musical instruments musically. But japa is when it's like our meditation. We chant the names of God, we chant Hare Krishna, but can I use that? Visual aid, thank you. This is a japa bag, inside of which there are japa beads. And thank you. So, I was joking, the first thing I said, sort of an insider joke, because when we do kirtan, when we sing and dance and play musical instruments, it's a lot of fun, and even people that have no spiritual interest like to get together with their friends and sing and dance and have a party. So singing and dancing, or just listening to music and dancing with your friends, even on the material level, is something almost everybody enjoys. And so we have this term in our jargon. We have unlimited jargon, so if you need jargon, just talk to me after this program. So, dovetail. In other words, if you already like to do something, then you do it in a spiritual way, which it makes it easy. Like if you like to eat, if you're one of, almost everybody likes to eat, So if you eat spiritual food, you're indulging your propensity to eat, but you're making spiritual benefit. So in the same way, when we do kirtan, we sing and dance and there's music, musical instruments. It's something which is easy to do because people like to do that anyway. But when it comes to japa, when you have to just sit there by yourself or sort of pace and just chant Hare Krishna, there is really, as far as I can tell, no material payoff. Because there's no music, you're not with your friends, at least, if they're there, you're not chanting in unison. And so it's interesting that when our teacher, Prabhupada is the founder and the supreme teacher of our movement, and he gave spiritual initiation, which is a covenant. It's an agreement. For example, civilization is based on agreement. The fact that you can drive your car, you go at the green light because you assume that the people coming the other way are going to honor their social contract and stop at the red light. You also assume that the people in charge of keeping the lights working honor their social contract and the lights are actually working. And so you assume all kinds of things just to go through a green light, just to walk down the street. You trust that other people, probably, if you're in the right part of LA, other people are not going to attack you. So just to function, when you go and when you eat food, whether you cook or go to a restaurant, you assume that there's not a troubled soul in the kitchen that poisoned it. Or, someone didn't do something weird to the food as it left the food factory or whatever. And so every time you breathe, you assume that no one put some invisible poisonous gas in the air. So at every moment, you are trusting that other people are honoring their social contract. At every moment. Otherwise you couldn't live. And so in business, never mind politics, that's a very not a savory topic right now, but so in spiritual life, it's like if you go to a university, you can audit a class or watch a class on YouTube. Now there's a lot of free online classes. But if you want a degree, if you really want to get serious and be certified as a doctor, as a lawyer, as an architect, as a professor of literature, as a librarian, you actually need to enroll. You need to enroll in a school. You need to get credit for your classes. And that's another covenant. It's a contract. And so everything serious in life, there are agreements. So if we want to get a spiritual education, if we want to make serious advancement, if we want serious self-realization, not just dabbling, or not just kind of typical modern age sort of a hydroplaning experience, skim the surface of spirituality. And I have many gurus. They're kind of like these collectibles. If we really want solid spiritual life, permanent spiritual consciousness, then we enter into a covenant. We're the people of the covenant. We enter into a covenant and we make a formal agreement that we will practice properly our spiritual life. And in return, a guru or teacher promises to kindly accept our donations. Just kidding. The guru agrees to act properly, to be a proper teacher in many ways, and set a good example. So when Prabhupada gave initiation, Prabhupada, the leader of our movement, he passed away in 1977, when he gave initiation and the new initiates had to make a formal vow, he asked them not to do 4 things because they are self-destructive and also they harm other people and other creatures, such as eating meat, intoxication, and so on. I won't go into all these things, but in terms of social science, in terms of even biology, the 4 things that we give up are actually scientifically harmful, both to ourselves and to society. So it's not just like we love rules. Some people do love rules, and I try not to spend a lot of time with them, but the point is that these basic rules we follow actually are objectively improve our life and improve the world. Prabhupada only asked us to do one positive thing when we are initiated, to become a formal disciple, student of Prabhupada. He only asked us to do one positive thing, to chant japa, this personal meditation on the holy names of God. Although he expected that a good practitioner would do kirtan, chanting out loud, or study sacred books, or try to help other people, and so on. But he only insisted that you promise to do one thing positively, which is to chant this japa. And of course, now why? Why would Prabhupada choose that? Of all, he could have said for your initiation vow, do kirtan for an hour a day, or read sacred texts for an hour a day. Why japa? My analysis is, so my analysis, but all those activities change the heart. Gotcha. So, why japa? Because japa, I would say, of all of our spiritual practices, has the least material payoff. It's not like, okay, I'm such a sincere soul, I'm going to just feast myself on this delicious food. That shows just how sincere I am. Well, right. Or I'm going to spiritually party and dance with my friends and listen to music and all that. That's nice. I mean, it's really great, but it's not like a great act of surrender. But to sit down and actually meditate, where there's no real material reward other than perhaps it calms your mind down, saying japa, there are beneficial effects of japa, but not as much as we do it. I mean, people that meditate typically do it a few minutes a day. So, japa is your quality time with God. If you don't really focus on God, if you don't really focus on Krishna, if you're not really trying to develop a relationship with Krishna, you are going to be bored out of your mind. And when things bore you out of your mind, you stop doing them. Because we don't do boring things. Especially nowadays when we're so busy. If you are actually solvent, if you actually, make a living and have a normal life, but you're not busy, raise your hand. Or maybe we can be like one of my friends calls me a trust fund brat. But actually, that's why when devotees give up some really important spiritual practice, positive practice, often japa is the first to go. Why? Because if I'm not really focusing, if I'm not really trying to cultivate a relationship with Krishna, it's going to be very boring and I'll stop doing it. On the other hand, on the positive side, japa, more than anything else in your life, is your private, alone, quality time with Krishna. It's just like so many devotees wish I could have spent time with Prabhupada. I wish I could have gone on a walk with Prabhupada. Or I wish I could have just talked to him alone and asked him all my questions. Well, guess what? You can do that with Krishna. So japa, more than anything else, is your opportunity to be alone with Krishna, to talk to him, to develop your own personal, unique relationship with Krishna. And so when it's done right, it's the most wonderful activity, and when it's not done right, it's probably the most boring. And I think that's why Prabhupada insisted on japa, because you can't fake it. You can't just go out there and whirl around and jump around, bang on a drum, and maybe be thinking of anything else except Krishna, but still have a good time. Or just feasting on all this really rich food, God knows what you're thinking about, but you're happy. So that's why japa is so important.
Who got the free piece for that one? Who won it?
Yeah, back there? Yes.
What is the job of Lord Brahma?
Of what?
Lord Brahma.
Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma.
Oh, okay, Lord Brahma. For those who...
Repeat the question.
All right. The question was, who is Lord Brahma? B-R-A-H-M. What?
What's his job?
Oh, what's his job? What's his job? Lord Brahma is, in Plato, it's called the Demiurgos. If you know Plato, the Timaeus. It's the person who sort of engineers the universe, creates the universe, but is not the supreme God. He just That's what he does. He builds universes. It's an honest way to, it's an honest way to make a living. Yes.
So universe meaning including all living entities.
Well, the soul is never created. We're eternal souls. But now we are souls in bodies, embodied souls. So our bodies, yes. But it's not that Brahma has a little shop where he kind of makes every body and... Wait, don't talk to me now. I'm just putting this last little fingernail on there. So it's not like that. But actually, there is a system. There's this great... It's like industrial, because we have to create trillions of bodies. You really need to go to industrial type situation. You need to mechanize. And so the universe is actually this fantastic, almost infinite mechanism. And someone supervises it. So Brahma supervises this cosmic mechanism.
For creation.
Yes.
So what is the difference between Brahma Samhita? It says that Ma Durga is also part of the creation.
Who is? Durga, yes. Vibarti Durga.
It says
It's a very big operation. And so yeah, there's a lot of people involved.
what is the difference between her job and Lord?
Well, to be honest, I'm the kind of person that has zero interest in how my computer works. Like if someone comes to my room and says, "You want me to tell you how your computer works?" Please, no, I'll pay you not to tell me. And so, to me, it's just if I turn it on, the right screen comes up, I'm happy. So as far as all the technical details of how the universe works, I'm glad somebody knows. And, if you're a devotee, it means you get kind of like cosmic apple care. Yeah.
How many Brahmas in the planet?
How many Brahmas in what planet?
All the planets.
Uh,
1, 2, 3.
To give a rough estimate, a lot. Actually, one Brahma per universe.
How many universes?
A lot. More than you can count. Yes, back there?
How do you prove that the Vedas or Purusha that they come from divine source and not from...
Okay, stump the Swami. How do you know that the Vedas are aparushaya? This is a Sanskrit word from the word Purusha. Purusha means a person, and in the sort of spiritual jargon of the Sanskrit tradition, it means the soul. And Purushaya means coming from a person, like a human person or a soul within the universe. And aparushaya means not coming from a person or a soul in the universe. So in other words, the Vedas have no human author, have no mundane author. How do we know that? Well, I would say that that's a derivative fact. That's a derivative fact. As soon as you say, how do you know, you're in an area of philosophy called epistemology. Episteme in Greek means knowledge. Sort of like the logos, epistemology. Episteme in Greek is knowledge. Logos means the logic or a rational account. So when you give a rational account, basically, how do you know you know? Under what conditions can you reasonably claim that you know something? Under what conditions can you reasonably claim that someone else does not know something, even if they claim to know it? And so that's called epistemology. So there are different foundations for epistemology. If you look at the history of, say, of Western philosophy, Aristotle, who actually was a member of the Hare Krishna movement without knowing it. Aristotle is famous for having said that when you claim something is true, someone can say, prove it. There's always one in the crowd, right? Someone will say, prove it. And to give an example, a very simple example I always give. Sorry for the rerun if you've heard this. Let's say you claim that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Someone says, prove it. You put a pot of water on the stove, put in a thermometer, it boils at 100 degrees Celsius. The person says, prove that that's pure water. Prove that's real mercury in the thermometer. And so you've got to prove, there are ways you can prove that this is real mercury. Or you can say this is real water. They can say, well, we need to test the water testing stuff. And we need to test the stuff that tests the water testing. In other words, Aristotle said you're pushed into an infinite regress of proofs. It never ends. No matter what you say, no matter what evidence you provide, someone says, we'll prove that. So, obviously, if we are trapped in an infinite regress of proofs, we can never prove anything, and therefore one can never say that I know anything. At least you can never say that, let's say, with philosophical legitimacy. But Aristotle to the rescue. Aristotle said that the way you escape an infinite regress of proofs is that you assert authentically, I mean, you really mean it, you're not just saying it, that something is self-evident. It proves itself, and therefore there's no need to bring in evidence from outside the thing itself. By the way, here's an interesting thing for Hare Krishna insiders. That is exactly the same argument that Lord Chaitanya gave to Sarvabhauma. He even used the same precise term. In Sanskrit, the term is swata pramanyam. Swata means by itself, literally, by itself. Swata and pramanya means it is evidence. It serves as evidence by itself, self-evident. So Lord Chaitanya, 500 years ago, well, approximately, gave exactly the same argument. So if, for example, as they say, you can't hold a light to the sun. If you say, where's the sun, and someone points to it in the sky, if you don't see it, then you actually don't see it, then we can safely say your sight is deficient. Because there's no other light you can hold up to the sun to show the sun. So if you don't see the sun, you have a physiological problem. But the sun is there. And anyone who has a normally functioning human body can see the sun and recognize it as such. So there's another type of epistemology, by the way. It's called coherentism. And that is when you have a system of thought where everything works together and everything supports everything else, and the end result of all that sort of mutual support is that you actually come to a higher understanding, which is self-evidently true. So we chant Hare Krishna, hence the Hare Krishnas. You know, we chant Hare Krishna, and we engage in certain spiritual practices, and we experience certain states of consciousness, which we cannot rationally explain other than by saying that we are having a spiritual experience. For example, if you want to be an empirical scientist, you have to assume certain things are true, or you have to claim certain things are true that you cannot prove, such as that there's a real world outside your mind. Because there's something called circular reasoning. Sorry for all this. If you can't stand it anymore, we'll give you a free coconut after the program. So, unless there's a real physical world outside your mind, all your empirical science is ultimately absurd. But how will you prove that? You can't prove it empirically. Circular reasoning means that you're trying to prove something, but you give the conclusion you're trying to prove as evidence of itself. And so between the premise and the conclusion, it just goes around in a circle. I'll give you an example. Right now I'm standing here holding a microphone. So if someone says, I don't believe there's really a physical world outside my mind, I can say, well, look, here's a microphone. It's right here. I can touch it. You can touch it. You can see it. That's circular reasoning because I'm trying to prove, let's say, that there's a real physical world. But this is a real microphone only if there's a real physical world. So I'm giving as evidence that there's a real world. There's a real world because there's a real world. If that sounds childish, it is. Like if a child says something is so, why? Because it is. So the point is, in order to do empirical science, you have to believe that the quality, the nature of your experience of the physical world is such that it proves itself to you, that there's no other reasonable way to explain your experience than by saying that there's a real world out there. And so if all of empirical science is based on making this self-evident assumption in Krishna consciousness, structurally we do precisely the same thing as science. We simply have a different starting point. People who join the Hare Krishna movement God, what were they thinking? Anyway, people who join the Hare Krishna movement that have, for the right reasons, it's because we experience a self-evident truth of Krishna consciousness. So structurally, philosophically, we're doing exactly the same thing as an empirical scientist. Regarding the Vedas, it's like, why sweat the Vedas? In other words, if I'm chanting Hare Krishna and I'm getting all these amazing experiences and I find that I have entered into this completely coherent, self-validating, supreme system of knowledge, I'm not going to worry about details. Like, whatever the Vedas are, I have gotten this supreme knowledge and I am working steadily towards spiritual perfection, self-realization, going back to my eternal home. And so if all that is happening, I'm not going to worry about the other stuff. I mean, take a typical scientific conference. If someone stands up and they say, okay, this is a specialist in some particular arcane little branch of science, and nowadays everyone who gets a higher degree in science or a higher degree in anything is in some tiny little field that no one else knows or cares about. So if someone gets up in a scientific conference and they're the expert and they speak certain things, everyone accepts it. If they say, look, I did the experiments, I tested it. Because in the real world, no one tests everything. And so if you look at the different ways we get knowledge, one is empirically, one is by logical induction or deduction. Another way is by hearing from authorities. So Shruti, hearing from authorities, it's not only, people who somehow are in the Hare Krishna movement. That's how science operates. That's how every academic field operates, because no one reads all the books. And all the academic fields are so almost like insanely specialized that everyone constantly is taking someone else's word for all kinds of things. And so structurally, we are doing exactly the same thing that every science is doing and virtually every academic field. And so, why not the Vedas? Like, why not? There was someone back here, a lady, I don't want to be accused of being a male chauvinist pig. Yes. Hey, Horatia. It's my old...
I just wanted to go back to when you were talking about japa.
Yes.
You said if you're doing it wrong, you're going to get bored and probably stop, so you have to do it right. So my question is, how do you do it right? Because I'm probably doing it wrong.
Okay. Horatia said that I said, she accused me of saying that if you don't do japa right, you'll be bored and stop. If you do japa right, you'll enjoy it and keep doing it. So how do you do japa right? Put another coin in the meter, then I'll tell you. Okay. Japa right means that you take seriously what's really happening. As we know, God is present in His name, something which is taught by every world religion, actually, that God is present in His name. And so if I'm in the presence of a most important person, I have to be nice. If you actually are in the, just like, if let's say you were with the LAPD chief, voracious, okay, sorry. Anyway, this beautiful young lady is actually, I'm proud of her, very proud of her. Anyway, so let's say in any particular field, if you're speaking to the owner of your company or the president of your university, or I won't say the president of the United States, you probably wouldn't want to talk to him, but let's say you were talking to some extremely important person, you're going to pay attention. You're not going to like doze off like, I'm sorry, what'd you say? I wasn't listening. And so when we chant japa, we're with Krishna. So if you just understand that one simple fact, you're actually with Krishna. Pay attention and just remember who you're with and chant personally, and that'll do the trick. She actually she sells lemonade actually on the Yes.
Can you elaborate on the individual relationships that we have with Krishna?
On the what relationship?
That we have with Krishna.
Relationship with Krishna.
That like by chanting japa,
Yes.
we each have our own something.
It's a personal relationship. We're part of God. I mean, we're part of God. You could say God is our supreme parent, father and mother, creator, but we have a more intimate relationship.
Does that mean that we experience spiritual things differently than others, even though there's an absolute?
One and different. It's like, for example, everyone right now here under this tent, all of us know that we're under a tent. All of us, I hope, know that we're in Venice, California. This is a Hare Krishna program. Where are you all going? So yeah, actually this is a Hare Krishna program. And so, or for example, you're a girl, I'm a guy. So there's actually millions of facts that we all agree on. And yet, you are having your own personal unique experience. And I'm having my unique experience of this. And so reality, when you sanely, as a sane human being, as a sane, rational human being, when you see what's going on around you, there must be a balance between the subjective and the objective. And it's the same in our relationship with Krishna. You have your own relationship with Krishna, and yet in many ways the experience is universal. Yes.
Is it
La
possible?
batería, ¿cuánto queda?
La batería?
¿Qué porcentaje?
Time?
The battery?
78%.
Oh, good, good. Yes. Go ahead.
Is it possible to present Krishna consciousness as scientific? Something scientific, like people
Yeah, is
everywhere?
it possible to present Krishna consciousness as something scientific?
Can I finish? Like people everywhere around the world accept like Newton's law.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know
Like
what
that.
you're saying. I know what you're getting
Yeah.
at. Yeah, but the first thing is we have to understand it in a scientific way. You know, we have to make sure our... Here's the part where I get myself in trouble. We have to make sure that our spiritual science is not mixed with mythology. For example, thinking that if I take a piece of cloth and I fold it a certain way, it magically becomes spiritual. Maybe we can talk about that. So, we really need to understand the spiritual science and not mix it with mythology and, no offense intended, Hindu superstitions. Like if I'm chanting a mantra, some evil spirit's going to penetrate my right hand, it will bounce off my left hand, will also bounce off cotton and presumably also synthetic fabrics for reasons that we can't really explain because you're not advanced enough. So, I think when the day comes that we actually present a spiritual science, a real spiritual science, because it is a spiritual science, but then the world will accept it. For example, there's a medical science. I'm not a doctor, although I'm a guru, which means I'm a know-it-all. I mean, I know all things, but so, there is a real spiritual medical science, but I'm not a doctor. So if, say, God forbid, suddenly you have some medical problem, I can't help you, even though there is a medical science. So in the same way, I may be a faithful devotee, I may chant Hare Krishna, and do all kinds of nice, faithful stuff. But if I don't have a real scientific understanding, if I'm like immersed in all kinds of mythology and superstitions and rituals and without really paying attention to spiritual science and what our books really say and what the actual history of Gaudiya Vaishnava is, if I'm not a scientist, the fact that Prabhupada presented a spiritual science is not going to help the world. It's not the Hare Krishna movement is not going to become an important, powerful spiritual movement unless there are real spiritual scientists out there. If we just come off as something extremely ethnic, full of stories and rituals, don't hold your breath till the Hare Krishna movement wins, because, well, you will turn blue, so in that sense you'll be like Krishna. So, anything else? Yes, I'm sorry, you have a question?
You were bar mitzvah, so was I.
He said that I was bar mitzvahed and so was he.
What do I say to our rabbinical brethren when they're as violently against Krishna as these born-again idiots screaming, "We're just a pajama party. We're
Well, technically we are a pajama party. But
we're just a worshipful of idols."
yes.
And I try to tell them in an erudite way, no, we're not.
Well, first of all, Fanaticism is a psychological type. In every religion in the world, in every political movement in the world, in all over academia, you will find thoughtful people and you will find fanatics. So what do you tell fanatics? Bye. Because it's actually an offense against chanting to preach to the weird. So again, in every religion on earth, in every political, social, cultural, academic movement on earth, there are some people who are wired. They're neurologically fanatical. That's been shown. And so we don't really deal with them. The real goal is to love God. And one little interesting tidbit, when I was in Israel, we have a great program in Israel. It's a great place. I was going over the 10 Commandments with the Israeli devotees, and Hebrew is their first language. So I assume they know Hebrew. And what I found interesting is the 10 Commandments, it actually doesn't say not to make an idol of God. What it actually says is not to make an idol of demigods. Not to make an idol of like these polytheistic, nature gods. It says you shall not, worship these many gods nor make graven images of them. I thought that was very interesting. And then, as I say, the winners write the history. If you read the Old Testament, what you find is there's a particular section of the Old Testament where basically it's after Solomon. Solomon actually built the first temple in Jerusalem, and then it was ultimately destroyed by Babylonia when the Jews went into exile around the time of the prophet Jeremiah. So roughly between, let's say, Solomon and Jeremiah, you have this first temple period in Israel and in Jerusalem. And what's interesting is that practically most of the time that first temple existed, they're worshiping deities in the temple. And of course, ultimately Judaism, which had all kinds of internal disputes and contrasts, ultimately people who were iconoclastic against that won, and they wrote the histories. Solomon, Shlomo. Anyone here named Shlomo? That's in Hebrew. So Solomon, who's considered, the wisest king. Solomon had, if any of you know Yiddish, a shiksa wife. Solomon actually had a non-Jewish wife. Yeah, never accept a shiksa guru. That's to you personally. Solomon had a non-Jewish wife, and in those days, I think his royal palace was up on the Temple Mount, where the temple is. And what did he do? Did he break all of her idols? Did he condemn her? Did he execute her? Kind of pull a Henry VIII on her? No. What he actually did was he built her a nice little shrine where she could worship her understanding of God. This is in the Old Testament. So the way I put it, God is not a fanatic. So anyone who's fanatic is not representing God. It's very simple. I'll repeat that just so I can sound like a Sunday morning evangelist. What I say it is, and I'm going to repeat this now. Of course, I'm reserving most of my time for the donations because that's Sunday morning. So, is that God is not a fanatic. So anyone who's fanatic is not representing God. I don't care what their religion is. Anything else? Going. Yes. Back there, the man in the polka dot bow tie. Oh! Hey, Hare Krishna.
So going back to how you...
What's your name? Oh, Kurumai. Hey.
So going back to how you were saying about spiritual science and that we should present it as a spiritual science, so can you briefly summarize Vaishnava philosophy as a spiritual science? Briefly how we should present that to
Yes. That was very unfair. She asked me to actually demonstrate what I claimed. That was not nice. So I said that we should present Krishna consciousness as a spiritual science. So could I summarize what it means and what is the spiritual science? No, I absolutely will not do that. So, to be a science, to be any kind of a science means that your claims, or to be rational, because I would argue that science is a subset of a larger category, which is to be rational. Empirical science is one of the ways that you can be rational. They don't like own the game, you know. That's one way to be a rational human being. There are other ways. There are inductive ways, deductive ways, empirical ways. There are many ways to be rational. So, to be rational in general and to be rational empirically means that what you claim to be true does not go beyond your actual knowledge. So I would say to be rational and scientific means that you have a good grasp of what it means to know something. You actually have an understanding, a rational grasp of what it means to know anything. So if someone says to you, how do you know that? You can give an account of it. These are the good reasons that convince me that I actually know something. Whether it's knowing there's a real world outside my mind or knowing that Krishna is God. So if your, let's say, enthusiasm and the claims you make are matched by or supported by knowledge, then it's a science. And it doesn't mean that you can't teach Krishna consciousness until you're pure and know everything. Because everyone that's really dedicated to Krishna does have experience, does have realization. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that really are just hanging on for the free food, but they're a very small number. I think they're a very small number. So if you have come to Krishna and you stay with Krishna and you're giving yourself to Krishna, you know, I mean, we always try to speak very humbly in Krishna consciousness. Actually, being humble is not something we trouble ourselves about very much, but we do speak very humbly. So apart from all the humble talk, the fact is that, like you, I mean, the fact that you're here, the fact that you believe that you're doing what you do, is because you do have experience. You do know something. And so the more we pay attention to our own knowledge and try to understand philosophically, I know this, but how do I know it? And what's the basis of my certainty? And so it's not faking it, it's just really maybe becoming a little more philosophical and aware and paying attention to things that you really do know. And so the fact that you maybe give philosophical attention to your own knowledge, in a sense, is what enables you to present Krishna consciousness in a rational, convincing way to others. Yes. Oh my God, it's like 2 or 3 girls in a row. Do we allow that in the Hare Krishna? Sorry, just kidding. That's a joke. Yes.
Can you talk about a spiritualist role in caring for the environment and like to what level you take it?
Yeah, I mean, the environment is Krishna. Trashing God's creation is obviously, you know, some people claim to be religious and they trash God's creation. It's like saying I love my mother and then I go and tear her house apart, you know, and just trash it all. No, that's not how you show you love. You don't show you love your parents by trashing their house. And, you know, trashing the earth is not the way to show that you're really religious. Although we do know, to be honest, I mean, we do have evidence that Jesus actually came to this world to establish people's right to have military-grade assault weapons, trash the environment, and engage in predatory capitalism. I mean, it's right there in the New Testament somewhere. I forgot exactly where. Religious people, by the way, have the greatest opportunity on earth to be hypocrites. I mean, when a religious person is hypocritical, no one can match it. Yes?
Where is the tendency to criticize others and to undermine others and to put them down, like almost as a routine practice? Where is it coming from, and how can we?
Okay. Where does it come from? That tendency to criticize others and put others down? Maybe because it's so much fun. I mean, in a perverse way, obviously. Because after all, if you consider, like, why are we in the world at all? We're in the world at all because of our self-centeredness. Because in the spiritual world, God is the center, Krishna is the center. So we come down here to have our little cheap thrills, to quote that old record album. So we come here to this world to experience a type of lunatic self-centeredness. Because we're actually not the center of the universe. So when we are self-centered, we're kind of clinically insane. But because everybody else is too, no one notices it. So if you consider that we're in this world to be self-centered, and what better way to make yourself feel great than to put someone else down? Because, you know, the material world's a zero-sum game. Like, if I win, you have to lose. If you didn't lose, I didn't really win. You know, that's why, you know, people get so frustrated. These little, like, kids' athletic leagues where some parent comes and says, no one wins or loses. We want everyone to play. And it's like, you know, people who really are athletes, they go crazy because they want to win. And so you didn't really win if someone didn't lose. And so for you to be really great, someone has to lose. You have to be better than someone. Let's say you take your last dollar and you buy some luxury car, and then by some cruel twist of fate, you go out the next morning, everyone in your city bought the same car. You wasted your money because you didn't buy the car because it actually gives you a better ride or anything like that. You bought it so you could, you know, look down on other people. And so in the material world, you feel good when you feel better than others. So by putting others down, you put yourself up in a very sick way.
How do you overcome that?
How do you overcome that? You have to find a higher taste. You have to find pleasure in serving. As Bob Dylan actually got this from Prabhupada's books, Everybody Has to Serve Somebody, that's where he got that song. So, unless you really find pleasure in humility, don't look at me, it's an acquired taste, I'm working on that one. But unless you really take pleasure in serving, unless you like love, like if you love your children, as you know, if you're parents, you enjoy much more seeing your children succeed than if you succeed. It's a higher pleasure. And so when you learn to love, then you actually take pleasure in the success of others. That's what it means to love people. Then you'd rather see them succeed. And if you're not there yet, fake it. Because there's also, you know, we practice devotional service, so there's like sadhana humility. Aristotle said this. Back to Aristotle. This is his day. Aristotle wrote a book called the Nicomachean Ethics, in which he gives his theory, philosophy of ethics, and he says that virtue is something you practice. In other words, if you practice doing the right thing, you'll actually learn to love it. That's what we do in Bhakti Yoga. So practice being a nice person. Practice not being a jerk. And then you'll actually, hopefully, come to like it. So therefore, yeah, just practice. In other words, understand the way you should be. If you don't even understand the way you should be, it's like, go back to the free feast and, you know, have some more prasadam. But if at least we can understand what we should be, then practice it. Practice doing the right thing, and then you'll come to really live it. So thank you all very much. As Elvis used to say, you've been a great audience. So,
Who wrote a question again?
we have. For everyone that was asking questions, I'm sorry. Maybe send me an email or something because it's kind of the time's up here. So, there are a lot of people on Facebook all around the world watching. So, say hello to them. Hare Krishna.
Let's give a round of applause for Vidadananda.